Well, start of day 3, England trailed by 12 runs. That deficit was wiped out on the very last ball of the first over. And since then, it was all England to finish off day 3. Ricky, have you calmed down from your first stint? Because you were not a happy camper.
Well, I had NASA probing me, didn't I?
He did probe you a little bit.
Just sticking his pointy little elbows into my ribs every time.
No, that was his nose. No.
Every time the boundary was whistling through a square leg. No, I've calmed down a little bit now.
8 fours in the first 5 overs, though. Australia just didn't get it right on a day where you knew they had to.
Yeah, and interestingly, we talked about it in comms. It was one of probably the only innings in this entire series where they've started with their deep point and their deep square up. And it was probably another time in the series where England were probably going to come as hard as ever. So it's not just about the tactics, though. It's about the execution. Like, if they bowled well there, then the field looks fine. But if you bowl poorly with that field like that, then the field looks fine.
Yeah.
Field looks bad, and that's, just the execution wasn't quite there with the new ball. I thought that after the couple of overs that Stark bowled, I think went for 22. I thought Cummins would come into the attack. He did that, but they got off to that flying start again, set the tone, set the momentum for the game, for the day, and Australia took a long time to sort of work their way back into the contest.
30 for 1 in that first session.
Yeah,
130.
130 for 1. Look, the only thing that I can put it down to is that these teams have played against each other 5 times over a very, very short period of time, right? So Australia know the strengths and weaknesses of Duckett and Crawley. They know that you're supposed to bowl 5th, 6th stump, getting Crawley to drive, but they couldn't do it. They know not to run up and bowl at the body of Ben Duckett and allow him to tuck you away on the leg side. But they did that too. And the only thing I can put it down to, it's not a lack of planning, because I mean it's just obvious. You don't even have to talk about it. Everybody knows that that's what you're supposed to do with those 2 guys. But the only thing I can think of is fatigue. Australia in their 6th Test match over the space of a very, very short space of time. They came out of the blocks, like a train in the first couple of Tests to go 2-0 up. And ever since then, England, ever since Headingley really, and sort of Mark Wood's spell, perhaps even Ben Stokes, 80 at the back end to kind of level that game up on first innings, it's pretty much been England.
Yeah.
And I think that that fatigue played a huge part for Australia this morning. They just had nothing. Even the fielders were not supporting the bowlers. The bowlers couldn't find the right line and length. England were out of sight. Well, not out of sight. I don't want to over-exaggerate, but 130 in that first session. Third innings of a match, and we all know third innings can be really tricky. You can mess games up in the third innings like nobody's business. And England were just out of the blocks and gone before Australia had woken up to what had happened to them.
And we sort of say, well, club cricket we say road cones, but we looked at a couple of the Aussie fielders at times and just thought there was absolutely nothing in terms of energy out there.
Yeah, it did look a little bit flat, didn't it? Especially after those first couple of overs, and you can't afford it to be that way. You need senior guys to stand up. You need the guys that bring the life and the energy to be doing it, not from the first ball of the series until the last. And if you think back as well, that morning session today was arguably Australia's most important session in the whole series. If they want to go back to Australia being winners of the Ashes and not just a team that's retained the Ashes, then it was vitally important for all of them to get together. They had a big chat as well. We highlighted that. They had a big chat before they went out and bowled their first over. Cummins spoke. He threw that over to Labuschagne. They had a good chat. And it would have been about execution. That's what it would have been talking. They would have been talking about make sure we start well. That we know they're going to come hard. These first couple of overs are going to be crucial, and they got those wrong. And that was the England domination from there.
Yeah. So Stark made the breakthrough, getting Duckett his second 40 of the Test match, and then it was a little bit of who's going to come out at 3 with no Moeen Ali. And Ben Stokes walked down the stairs, and when the crowd realised it was him coming out at 3, there was an almighty cheer, and You've been calling for it for quite a while.
Yeah, well, just ever since he stopped being the all-rounder in the side, I thought England had an issue there, a gap that needed to be filled. And to be fair to Moeen Ali, he played really well up at Old Trafford at number 3. But I thought the obvious choice was for Ben to go there. He's one of England's best technical players. He can change tempos in a way that some of the other guys who bat 5, 7 can't. And so he's more than adept at sort of soaking up some pressure if the bowlers bowl well, good defensive technique and whatever, and then he can go mad anyway. And that means you've still got the likes of Moeen Ali, Harry Brook and Johnny Bairstow to come behind him. So England are not lacking for power down in the order. So look, the crowd loved it. I think the crowd really understand with Ben Stokes that there is a guy there, is a proper warrior, and also he and he alone has kind of got this England team playing in this way that they're loving to watch. So on 2 counts, they were really pleased to see him come out there. And I honestly think that he could end up staying there unless the knee rights itself, or he gets whatever he needs done to the knee, and he becomes a genuine all-rounder again.
He's got the team playing in this style, but he's probably the one in probably the top 6 or 7 that probably isn't quite going at the hell for leather rate that you see the rest of the players.
Yeah, he picks his moments. He does it when the team needs him to do it. You know, when the game needs someone to explode, that's when he does it. Like we saw it at Lords, we saw it at Headingley. You know, the damage he does with the tail, you know, is undeniable. And back to Butch's point, I think if England had been batting in the 4th innings of this game, I think we would have seen Stokes back at number 6 in his normal spot when they're chasing a total. Yeah. I think situationally today, the situation was perfect. He could, after the flying start even more so, he could go out, just play himself in. I mean, he still scored reasonably quickly. Joe outscored him when he came in again, as Root's been able to do, you know, over the last 18 months. So I think it was a perfect situation for him. And, you know, today he didn't have to be that Mr. Fix-It. You know, the other guys could bat around. He was hoping the other guys could sort of bat around him.
So Australia finally got their 4th stump line right to Zach Crawley. He departed for another wonderful knock, 73 to his name, and each and every Test match in this series he's passed 50 at least once as well. And he's the leading run scorer.
Well, I mean, the transformation in him technically has been astonishing, really, and been calling for it for a while. You know, looking at his setup and looking at the way that his balance was always sort of more towards the back foot, rather negated the reach that he has with his height and all the rest of it, and fixing that has just made the world of difference to his balance, to his judgment. You know, he does get the ball away through extra cover safely a lot more often than he did, but defensively he just looks so much better. And the man hits the ball so hard. You stray onto those pads or you get short at him and the ball disappears at a rate of knots. He has played absolutely superbly, and you know, thoroughly justified the faith that Key and McCullum and co have had in him all of this time. And I think all of us could see the potential there. It was a question of when was he going to wake up to sort of like to getting out in the same way over and over and over and over again before a change came. The change has come, and now he looks like a really fine player.
So 140 for 2 when Crawley departed, and then it just was hands over to Joe Root, who got off to a flyer, and then Johnny Bairstow, who came down and had a look in his eye that was about to say, everybody just stand back, let me at them.
Well, it was a nice time to bat then too, wasn't it? With you know, I mean, there was still, I guess you could say there was still a little bit to lose. England were still a long way ahead in the game, but with this free-flowing nature that England have been playing with, and I think I said on comms at the time, though, that Johnny's in the team for that exact role today, to go out and impose himself on the contest and play freely, score quickly, and play an innings that sort of bats his team into a match-winning position. So the timing was right, but you still got to go and do it. And you look at his numbers in the last 12, 13 Test matches; they're actually better than Joe's. Like we talk about how good Joe Root's been in his last 18 matches. Well, I think Joe's made 500s in his last 18 games, and Johnny's made 4 in his last 12 games. Yeah. With a 99 not out last game and another 80 today. So his batting number, averaging over 60, his batting numbers are outstanding.
Yeah, just to sort of back up what you were saying there, but Joe Root, 91, averages 51 for this series, and 22 with the ball is pretty handy when you lose Leach and you lose Moeen Ali as well, isn't it?
I know. It's been great, hasn't it? That Joe, he's just getting more and more confident with the ball. You know, there was a period there where he was an absolute sort of part-time bowler. So he'd come on and he'd start off with a leg break, and then he'd bowl sort of like a pretend carom ball thing, and then he'd mess about with undercutting, and he kind of didn't really take himself very seriously with the ball. I think this series he's really had to kind of like to be the number one spinner, and he's actually pretty good at it, right? He's not bowled any rubbish.
I'll give himself a slot in India. He might
do. You know, I think he would prefer it if he didn't have. You know, he's got a dodgy back that he's had pretty much all through his career, and he'd prefer not to have to kind of carry the burden of bowling lots of overs of spin, because England need him to score runs. However, when needed, he can step up.
Yeah, well, Australia finally got through Wokes cheaply. He went for 1. Moeen Ali came out 29 off 38 deliveries. And Australia sort of were picking up reasonably quick wicket to the back end until it was Stuart Broad and Jimmy Anderson not out at the end of the day, with England leading 300 by 377. I've got a quiz for you guys. Here we go. What do these players have in common? England greats, Brearley, Atherton, Flintoff, Cook. West Indian greats, Richards, Marshall, Ambrose. Australian greats Ponsford, Bradman and Clark. There was a collective...
It's got something to do with the Oval.
Definitely was something to do with the Oval, and it's breaking news that has just come through.
Pretty sure it's
right now.
retiring, playing their last Test match at the Oval.
We have a retirement at the back end of day 3 here at the Oval. And I think usually when you get to the Oval, you're expecting something. We had Cook, what was he, 71 and 147 on a pretty magical day. And I think most people were probably thinking this could be the last game for a lot of players, whether or not they retire and announce it, or just it just happens to be their last game.
Yeah.
Stuart Broad has announced his retirement. Is it a surprise to you, Butch?
Look, he's been talking about it for a little while in terms of sort of when might be the right time. I think he surprised himself in terms of his performance and the fact that he's played all 5 tests and that he's up
Phenomenal.
there. He still has the chance of being the leading wicket taker in the series. And I think, you know, Stuart he's just become a dad recently, and that he's looking forward to that transition in his life. I do believe that there's probably a slot for a fast bowler in the comms team at Sky, so who knows? You've got a different skill set, but I think that he was kind of ready. He'd been readying himself for this moment, and then the bonus of it is that he gets to go out on top, and very, very few of us get the chance to do that. And I think it's what a career, what a player, and the Australians are going to miss him because he provides that little bit of edge that I think has been missing throughout this series when Stuart Broad is in the game, and they will also be very, very happy that he's gone because he's been a right pain in the backside for them for a very long period of time.
So 167 tests, 602 test wickets, 150 of them against Australia in Ashes series, which is the leading wicket taker for an Englishman as well, and plus little niggles and swapping the bails and all those sorts of things as well.
Yeah,
he will be missed.
I'm a big believer on judging players on longevity and how long they can maintain such high standards at the absolute highest level. I think we were saying in comms the other day, as well, he's 25 consecutive test matches at home. I mean, that's unbelievable within itself. 167 games for a fast bowler. Imagine how many ice baths has been on the back of those, how many warm-ups every morning. But you talked about Ben Stokes being the ultimate warrior. Well, Stuart Broad's the ultimate Ashes warrior. You want to define him and have a word for him, it would be that. All of his best cricket's been played in Ashes series. And we talk about it all the time, but people's names and reputations are forged out of what they're able to achieve in Ashes series. So, Stuart Broad, 600 wickets, 150 against Australia in Ashes series. He can be mightily proud of what he's achieved in that blue cap, and I'm sure we saw his family here at the ground this afternoon. I'm sure they're equally as proud of him and what he's been able to achieve. And I played a fair bit against him. You wouldn't have played with him?
No, not with, but I played against him when he was a youngster at Leicester. And so we're sort of an old grizzled and gnarled lot at the Oval by that sort of time, and he really impressed us. And so we kind of tried to put the word on him and say, well, you know what, there's a big club down south that might be quite
it's unlike Surrey, isn't it?
Yeah, but I mean that's kind of what you do. And that was from the very first sort of times that we came up against him. He just had obviously he had the raw talent with the ball and the height and all the rest of it, but there was a competitive spirit there that you saw right from the off.
The other point you made as well is about finishing on a high, finishing when you've had a good series, potentially finishing when England win a Test match at the Oval. I think that's even looking back on my career, not many people get a chance to do it. But the thing with Stuart now is he'll be remembered for that. He'll be remembered for that last series and how good he was in that last series right at the back end of his career. Other people get remembered when their careers have started to dip and are going down. So I think it's just about the perfect time, especially if England do go on and win this game tomorrow.
167 test matches, 138 of them he's played with his very, very good mate in Jimmy Anderson. Be a few tears by the end of this batting partnership or by the end of the test, and maybe even some more questions potentially for Jimmy.
Well, possibly. I think maybe people might have thought that Jimmy would be the one to go first, given the relative success and or otherwise of their series. And also, I just felt myself and Michael Atherton were on commentary at the end there when Jimmy came out, and you just kind of thought that the crowd maybe sensed that this could be the last time that they see the two of them together with bat in hand. Obviously, they'll roar them in tomorrow when they're bowling. So, you know, people talk about it, people are thinking about it. I mean, I remember when Ath retired, it was the most undemonstrative thing. It's become quite a modern phenomenon, really. People announcing their retirement a long way in advance of it actually happening, and kind of, you know, the whole thing then becomes about them, you know, throughout a series or whatever it might be. And I don't know how I feel about that. I'm not wildly enthusiastic or in favour of that. But I think, you know, for Stuart to have just one, you know, the one day left tomorrow and say, listen, I'm going to call it a day and let everybody know, and give the crowd a chance to give him a proper send-off. And, you know what he's like when he gets at the end of his mark and he's geeing them all up.
Do you think he's going to have to do that tomorrow?
Well, I doubt exactly. He won't even have to do it tomorrow. People will know, and people will want to be here to see, you know, to see an England great leave the stage.
And when he does leave the stage, he'll leave in the right area. Was it Mornay Morkel that ended up into the curator's shed when he walked off in the wrong direction?
Yeah, probably a tear in the eye, and he walked off the wrong way. I mean, again, I'd mention Athers because I was playing in his last Test match here at the Oval in 2001, and there has never been a more undemonstrative sort of, you know, he almost was embarrassed. He kind of just shuffled off the field and might have just raised his bat to people, and then, you know, like the old silent movies, the gumshoe sort of puts his collars up and walks off into the rain, you know, with his coat tied up behind him. It was just so perfectly Michael Atherton. Yeah. It won't be like that tomorrow for Stuart Broad.
And I have a sense that the Australians will certainly step up and be a part of a wonderful send-off for him, whether it's tomorrow or the day after as well. So after all that, big news here on the podcast on day 3, a retirement, that of Stuart Broad. Still got 2 more days to go though. England with a lead of 377 plus a wicket in hand as well. Please feel free to join us tomorrow, and of course back at 10:15 in the morning right here on Sky Sports Cricket.